afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. And lots to talk about today. Joining me a little later in the program, we have South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez to talk about what she's been seeing as the DOD installs new signage in the new militarized zone here along the Rio Grande. And we're also going to check in with Julian Resendiz to talk about what the Mexican consulate is doing to ramp up services for folks here in the U.S. But first, let's get through some of the headlines making news across immigration and border, starting with a Venezuelan Little League baseball team that's going to miss the Senior Baseball World Series in South Carolina after they were denied entry into the U.S. because the players were unable to obtain visas. Cacique Mara Little League team from Venezuela qualified for the World Series after winning the Latin American Championship in Mexico. Now, the Little League International said in a statement, while this is, quote, extremely disappointing, especially to these young athletes, end quote. Venezuela is on President Trump's list of countries with restrictions for entering the United States or its territories. Also happening in New York, the Department of Justice has sued the city and officials over its sanctuary city laws. The complaint alleges that city sanctuary policies interfere with the enforcement of federal immigration law. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi said, if New York's leaders won't step up to protect their citizens, we will, end quote. The DOJ has filed similar lawsuits against Los Angeles, New York State, Colorado, Illinois, the city of Rochester, and several New Jersey cities over sanctuary policies. The Trump administration claims such laws interfere with federal immigration officers' ability to do their jobs and obstructs information sharing policies. Now, one thing we wanted to talk about today, speaking of all these issues going on for migrants across the country here in the U.S., is one country in particular is looking to kind of help out their folks that are over here in the U.S. right now, and that is Mexico, ramping up some of their consulate services. Joining me now is Julian Resendiz, our El Paso correspondent. Julian, tell me a little bit about what the consulate is doing for Mexican citizens here in the U.S.
Rudy, good to be back in the show. As you might remember, back in January, when President Trump took office, the Mexican government announced that it was going to prepare for the so-called mass deportations. So the first thing they did was set up gigantic tents in about 10 cities along the border. And they were pretty much waiting for people to come across the bridge after being expelled from the U.S. and then provide services for them over there in Mexico. Now, that really hasn't materialized too much. We have reports of about 70,000 Mexicans who have been sent back to their country since Trump took over. So now the emphasis is on what the Mexican government is trying to do for its citizens in the United States. Mexico has 53 consulates operating in major U.S. cities, and they're switching their preparation for the deportation to those locales. What they're doing is they've always had information sessions. You see one on your screens. On your screen, that was from a year ago, in which they invite nonprofits from the U.S. to talk to the immigrants who've been in the U.S. from Mexico for several years and tell them about number one, their rights, and number two, legal services available in case they face some legal trouble, such as deportation. So now what the Mexican government just announced a few days ago was that they were going to pour resources and reemphasize the work that they do in the United States to come to the aid of Mexican citizens who all of a sudden get caught up by ICE, end up in a detention center, so they can call them. And they're also doing something a little bit unusual but understandable, and that is they're telling their citizens, part of your rights is not to say anything to authorities. When they ask you, you identify yourself, that's a law, but beyond that, you really should not, you're not obligated to answer any questions. So they're getting very proactive in educating Mexicans about their rights in the U.S. and also kind of giving this legal advice amid the uncertainty of the so-called mass deportations.
Now, Julian, I have to ask, what exactly are Mexican officials saying about this process? What are they talking about exactly?
As always, the Mexican government and its diplomats are very careful of what they say in the United States. However, back in Mexico City, the president of Mexico has been outspoken that she is against what she calls indiscriminate deportations of people who have been her citizens who have been in the United States for a long time, that she says contribute to the U.S. economy. And she's even made some off-the-cuff remarks about what's going to happen to your economy, the United States, if we do away with all this migrant labor, especially in farm work, construction, and the hospitality industry, such as restaurants and hotels.
So often we get these different messages from DHS about the folks that they're catching and arresting and deporting. And so often we see the names of countries like El Salvador, Venezuela. How prevalent is folks, Mexican citizens that may be here? How prevalent is them getting picked up, or do we have those kinds of numbers yet?
We don't have a specific breakdown of who's getting picked up. The information I'm giving you, I'm getting it from the Mexican side. And that's a good thing about covering the border. You cover both sides of the border. You get the information from one side or from the other. So Mexico is keeping count of its citizens who are coming across the international bridges and the ports of entry. So they know how many Mexicans are being deported. They don't have a grasp of how many non-Mexicans are being deported because many of those South American, Central American citizens are no longer just being basically pushed across the border into Mexico. They're being placed in flights either to their countries of origin or to deep Mexico, to places like Tabasco, Chiapas, where there are some large immigrant facilities. But still, we know of at least 6,000 to 7,000, possibly 8,000 by now, non-Mexican citizens who have been sent across from the U.S. to northern border Mexican cities.
Yeah, and I know last week, I believe it was, we talked about some of those third country deportations as well. Do we know if any of those folks are perhaps getting sent on those flights?
What I can tell you is that there's still a lot of Central and South Americans here on the border. They're still waiting. They're still waiting in their minds. They hope there's going to be a change of immigration policy. If not this year or next year, maybe in 3 years when there's a new president in the U.S. So there's a lot of those citizens still on the border. As far as the deportation flights, the information we have is that there have been some flights from here, from El Paso to Central America and to South America. But most of those flights are happening from South Texas and other cities elsewhere in the United States.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Julian. We appreciate your continuing coverage on these issues that the Mexican consulate now ramping up their services, hoping to help some of their citizens. Stay with us, folks. We're back in a minute, and we're going to bring in Sandra Sanchez, our South Texas correspondent, to talk about some of the new signage going up in the military zones along the border. We'll be right back. And welcome back to this Monday afternoon edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, right on the banks of the Rio Grande. And speaking of the Rio Grande, I want to bring in South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez now. Hey, Sandra.
Hi, Rudy.
Hey, so one of the things that you have been following for a while now, pretty much since they declared a new militarized zone down here on the border, is these warning signs that were coming. They put a few up. Tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing down here.
Yeah, actually, we were the first ones to report this, and I'm really excited because we found what are just a couple that were put on the banks of the Rio Grande. But they're really not much to see. These are tiny little signs. I'm barely 5 feet tall, and these signs are maybe 3 feet high. They have 2 paragraphs in English, 2 paragraphs in Spanish. I want to read you a little bit, if you want to freeze that screen, what it says here. It does say warning, restricted area. Department of Defense property has been declared a restricted area by authority of the commander, and unauthorized entry is prohibited. All persons and vehicles entering may be detained and searched. But, there's some video I shot, some boaters that use this area, this public boat ramp. nobody could read it from the water. I asked this gentleman here, and he shook his head. No, he couldn't see it. I mean, I was up close to the sign, squinting at it, trying to read it myself. I know that the point of the signs are to warn people who are illegally crossing across there. We are looking at the banks of Reynosa right there, who are trying to come across illegally that shouldn't, right? But these fishermen who were crossing, who tell me that they go out every day and have for years and years, flew right past the sign, didn't see it, didn't know what it meant. Now, to back up a little bit, this National Defense Area was established last month when the Department of Defense basically took over lands 250 miles in Hidalgo and Cameron County that used to belong to the U.S. International Boundary and Water Commission. Exactly where those lands are, though, we still don't know. I mean, we know that the U.S. IBWC lands started from the middle of the river to our banks. But then in some places, we know that the border wall is a quarter mile from the river. Some places it's a mile over back, over a mile back. And those are IBWC lands where they built the levees for the border wall.
Yeah, I'm thinking in Brownsville, Sable Palm Sanctuary. You have to go through two to get through there.
So, so when I was standing and I was literally teetering atop the river, and the way I found this sign was I went to this RV park where we had gotten a tip that there was a sign put up, and I asked the lady, and she's like, "It's right there." And I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I just, she's pointing, and she says, "That's it. Oh, can I get there?" And she says, "Well, you can go to it, but if you fall in, I'm not fishing you out of the river." So I said, "No, ma'am, if I fall in, it's on me." Luckily, nobody fell in. None of the equipment fell in, but, we were right there over top of the water. And I understand you can't put the sign in the middle of the river, right? But it's so small. And this is just one of three. They started putting these up on Wednesday night, and they're intending to put many more. If we look at what they did in El Paso in West Texas, they put over 2,000 of these along the entire El Paso border, New Mexico, the entire New Mexico border. And apparently they are the same sign, but the river there is not the width or the depth that it is here.
Well,
so
I was going to say, you said 250 miles are now inside this militarized zone. How many signs do we actually have up so far?
Just three.
3
to 4.
Okay.
Yeah, they're kind of like the test. This is the first signs. Maybe they will come back and say, it's not really working. Nobody could read them. And actually, I was out there, and some Border Patrol officials were out there, and they told me they were looking for the signs because they had heard that they were up.
So DOD isn't really communicating where these signs are up to their counterparts actually working the border.
You know what? I've spoken to a few different agencies, and another law enforcement official told me the same thing. We've reached out to DOD. We want to know more. We really need to figure out the demarcation lines to, have a press conference, tell everybody where you can stand, where you can't. And that really hasn't been communicated. So, yes, I'm not trying to editorialize here, but I am saying that the signs are really small, and people don't know if they're walking on military lands. And that could be very dangerous because, having been in the military, that you don't cross on their property if you're not supposed to, right? There's a lot that can happen to you.
Well, I was going to ask, what direction are those signs facing? Because you said they're right on the river. Is it facing the river? Or
they're facing Mexico. And my point is, someone who comes across from Mexico, they know they're coming across. They are crossing illegally into the United States. That's not a port of entry. We know that's another country, and that is the United States, right? Now, what the signs are intended to do is to inform them, not only are you illegally crossing into the United States, but this is a U.S. military base, and that really ups the ante on what they can charge you, detain you, what they can do to you, you just don't walk onto someone's military base. So,
and it's interesting you say that because I've actually seen videos of migrants on both borders, both the northern and southern border, arriving to present themselves to, customs agents or border patrol agents. And they're warned, if you cross here, you will not be able to gain legal entry in the future. These are all the things. And these folks are still like, yep, don't care. I'm trying to cross anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I've told you the story about I was detained in Del Rio because I was trying to take a picture of the front of Laughlin, this Air Force base, just the sign, no special equipment. I wasn't past the gate. I pulled off the road onto the front property. I had not gotten in line. I had not gone through the gate. And they said, no, you were on our property. And it took a bit to get sorted. The pictures were destroyed. It was literally a picture of the sign. And I was detained. I was forced to enter the base, and they're under armed guard. I was held, and they watched me. They were very polite to me, but I can tell you I was scared.
Yeah, it's intimidating. Anytime you have a security forces airman standing in there over you with a M4 rifle, it's going to be a little intimidating, even if you really didn't do anything bad.
Well, and then I was told that, they're going to do something. There was some special code, and they were going to put me on a bus and take me somewhere. And I just kept thinking Guantanamo. And of course, that wasn't going to happen, right? But I said, no. I need to get out of here, apologies. And so people living here in South Texas want to know, do I have access to this public boat ramp, which is one of the very few that is available, from in Hidalgo County, south of Falcon Lake. I mean, can we get on the river? And, the river, it's a place where people like to go. It's cultural here. Mm-hmm. It's part of life here.
Yeah, a lot of folks think, too, that, when we're talking about these boaters that are going out there, they're thinking, it's recreational boating. But a lot of folks down here in South Texas, especially along the Rio Grande, they actually fish and go out on those waters to put food on the table for their families. It is a way of life being in that water.
It is. It's much more than just water skiing. But for a lot of people, and I did speak to some fishermen, who told me they would continue to fish. They had no intention of stopping. They were on a pier right next to the sign. I understand 60 yards south of that, there was another sign, but I couldn't get to it unless I was on a boat. One gentleman did offer to take me to it, but little risky with the big TV camera equipment that could fall in the river, right? So we all stayed dry, but I think that these were test signs. We hope more signs definitely are coming. We hope there's a demarcation line, and they let us know exactly where we can stand, where we can walk, where we can be. This was an RV park. This is where people live.
Well, and it's interesting you say that line of demarcation because, one of the things that I noticed on the sign, and it's something that you yourself mentioned, you got, in trouble for a little bit when you got picked up by the security forces out there at Laughlin, I believe you said.
Yes.
It says no photos, no videos, no drawings of anything of the installation. I have a lot of photography friends, obviously, in this field. We meet a lot of photographers, and they go out to the border to take beautiful sunset pictures, take pictures of the Rio Grande, all kinds of things. It's kind of begs the question, if I take a picture of the Rio Grande, am I now going to get, pulled over like you did as a journalist?
Well, it says no photographing or making notes, drawings, maps, or graphics. So maybe. Yeah,
and lots of questions still, lots of answers that we're going to be waiting for to see if we can go ahead and get more answers from you. Thank you so much, Sandra, for your reporting on this, but please stick around if you can, because coming up next, we're going to talk about immigration judges that are actually are taking those early retirements, getting out of the business, and we have one that's speaking out about the issues that they're facing. Stay with us. Border Report is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to this Monday afternoon edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. And one of the things that I wanted to tell you about today is that federal immigration judges fired by the Trump administration are now filing appeals, and they are pursuing legal action and speaking out in an unusually public campaign to fight for their jobs. Now, more than 50, or I'm told more than closer to 100 now, immigration judges have either taken those early resignations or have been let go since President Donald Trump took the presidency for the second time. While most never speak out, many are now describing terminations they consider unlawful and believe they were targeted because of racial and gender discrimination. I want to bring South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez back into the conversation. Sandra, I know recently you actually spoke with a retired immigration judge. Tell us a little bit about what what judges, that judge and others are saying about these issues.
Yeah, Rudy, the American Immigration Lawyers Association held a virtual press conference for us last Thursday and brought on a former immigration judge who actually used to also be president of this organization, Judge Trabador. And she was explaining some of the restrictions that are put upon the immigration judges now under the Trump administration. As you know, that this the immigration court system falls under the Executive Office of Immigration Review, not the normal where the normal courts, other courts are not under that process, right? And what they're saying is that these immigration judges are being pressured to quickly dismiss cases. Normally, when a person comes before an immigration judge and there is an order for dismissal, there's 10 days to give the other side a chance to make a decision where they want to do that or not. But what's happening is they're pressuring the judges to say, you know what, let's just make this decision now. And then there are charges that ICE is waiting, Immigration Customs and Enforcement is waiting out in the hallway. And these people are getting picked up. So people walk out of courts and say, this is the greatest day of my life. This was just dismissed. I'm, on my way towards my asylum claim or my, what I've been pursuing for immigration in the United States. And then they're being arrested, detained, deported in some cases. And immigration, Trabador said that this is not the way the immigration court system was set up. And then immigration judges are having to decide between what's right lawfully and their livelihood or their jobs. And so, yes, about 50 were fired, but between 50 and 100 have chosen buyouts, early retirement. They're just kind of getting out. And
go ahead.
We have such a backlog. We have 3.6 million immigration cases that are backlogged. So we need judges.
Yeah, I was going to say, I that sounds to me like it's only going to make the bottleneck way worse. I mean, 100 judges it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have millions and millions of cases that are backlogged, it's going to add pressure to those judges that are staying for sure.
Well, and since 2015, Congress has been appropriating more and more money every year to try to hire more judges, but they never reach the threshold that they have the money for. Part of it is it's not just hiring the judge, it's hiring the entire staff, the clerk, the bailiff, the translator, and then finding space for them. And so it's been kind of baffling watching this process since 2015, honestly, that, only so many, some years, maybe 20 will be hired, So, they're in this all-out push. Congress has appropriated the funds, and we can't seem to get them to fill the benches. And now we're going backwards. We're taking them away. So, they're saying it's too restrictive, and they're speaking out, which is, they're really showing a lot of courage in doing that in today's environment.
One of the things that I know we spoke to a retired immigration judge last month. One of the things that she had mentioned was just kind of the flaws in some of the process as it is. For example, young children showing up to these immigration court hearings with no representation.
Yeah, and the Trump administration has ended a lot of the funding that was for children. As just to recap, if a person goes to immigration court, they have the right to hire an attorney, but the United States does not pay for one for them. So again, we do not pay for that. But there were a lot of programs that were federally subsidized that helped children, unaccompanied youth, vulnerable families and populations getting pro bono legal representation. And a lot of these programs funded through NGOs have ended under the Trump administration. So, judges are saying people need to have representation before they come before us. Everyone says immigration law is one of the most complex within our country's system. It's kind of a fight between tax law or immigration law. And a tax lawyer will say it's the hardest, and immigration law will tell you hardest. But what I can tell you is they're among the top two, and they're changing all the time. And so, you do need, and there have been studies done that those who have legal representation, their outcomes that they want occur much quicker, at a much faster rate when they have a lawyer.
I just wanted to ask you one last question on the topic. We have less than a minute left or so. You mentioned something, you have the right to have an attorney when you're going into immigration court, but one will not be provided to you. I think a lot of folks have this misunderstanding that this is like a regular court, but it's not, correct?
No, it's not. It is not a regular court. It's operated under an entirely different system. And no, they do not have the right to have an attorney. And I think that's really important. I say that every time. I emphasize it every time because that is the way it's set up. They're also not. They don't go by name. They go by an A number.
Yes, I remember
alien identification number, a 9-digit number, right? In the entire game is different when you go to immigration court, and it's hard to keep up. It's hard to follow. And immigration judges now, for the first time, are speaking out.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting on that, Sandra. If you'd like to see any reporting that Sandra has been working on, or Julian or Salvador in San Diego, you can visit borderreport.com to get more, and that's where you can also watch this show tomorrow. Until tomorrow, have a good day.